Lol. This is like how I try and prep myself to look normal to people when I speak. I'm gonna do a Q&A video as a follow-up to the Closed COMEDONES video that I did about a month ago now. Why am I so high on the screen? Thought I got the framing perfect. Anyway, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for watching. I'm trying to be better at posting. It's not that I haven't created any content for YouTube, it's just that I've created it, watched it back, edited it, thought it was rubbish. I don't want it to be super sloppy. I'm trying not to be too much of a perfectionist, but also create content at the same time. I think I'm just taking a bit of time to like get it how I want it, which isn't a good sign that this is my best take because why is my head halfway out the thing? That's better. Anyway, also sorry if there's some noise in the background. I live in a block of flats that has the Grenfell cladding on, and it's taken them 4 years to remove it all, and they've set up camp outside my window. And if I didn't film it now, they're doing it every day for the next 6 months, so I thought it was now or never. And I'm just hoping that my camera sort of blocks out some of the sound because it's quite quiet for me, but it is, you can still hear it. So I put up a story on my Instagram asking anyone who had any questions, follow-up questions, for the video that I posted on Closed COMEDONES. Then I'll just sit here and answer all the most common questions. And I'm also trying to smile more as I speak because one of the reasons I haven't posted the video that I wanted to post on perioral dermatitis is because it literally looks like I'm about to cry the whole time. And that's a comment I've got my whole life, but I really see where it's come from in that video. I've got all the questions on my phone here. By far and away, the one that I got asked the most and the one that inspired me to create this video, like in itself, is how long did it take me to see results using the retinoid? Kind of hard to remember because it was in 2020, but when I think back, I think it took me about, and if you've seen the photo of my skin, you'll see that pretty much every pore on my cheek was a closed comedone. So there were a lot of closed comedones, and I think after like a month or 2 months, I noticed that my skin texture, even though it was bumpy, my skin was just a lot more glowy and healthy looking. I actually used to notice, especially in the beginning, that the next day my skin would look, even if it was still bumpy, it just looked a lot more glowy. So I noticed that within the first 1 to 2 months. And then I think after about 3 to 4 months, I probably had about 10%, maybe 10, 20% of my closed comedones left, and my skin was looking a lot better. I think it was by February, because I remember sending a picture, I'll put the picture on the screen, I remember sending a picture to my housemate of my face, because we were living apart at the time in between. I don't know if you'll be able to hear that, but that's what I listen to all day long. I'm not complaining, I know the work needs to get done, but it's just the sound of a chainsaw that gets you when you listen to it from every day. So me and my housemate were living apart in February of 2021 because we just moved out of a flat. We were waiting a month to move into our new flat, so I sent her a photo because I was living with my parents. That was in February, and I definitely had all the closed comedones in September. So September, October, November, December, January, February. So like between 5 and 7 months is when I completely cleared it all. And I think once I cleared them all, obviously I still get them from time to time, but once you've cleared them, I feel like that's when the fun can really begin, because that's when you're now just preventing them and your skin just looks better and better and better. I'll also touch on a question that I get a lot, which I don't know if it's in here, but I do get asked it so many times, which is, why am I still getting acne if I'm using a retinoid? I really need to check myself because my face just goes so serious when I'm talking in general, and especially on YouTube videos. Lol. This is like how I try and prep myself to look normal to people when I speak. Retinoids are amazing, but they don't prevent acne in its entirety. They will definitely reduce the amount of acne, or they should reduce the amount of acne that you get. They can't stop all acne forever. Like, I still get breakouts, way less than I used to get, but you can't, like, retinoids are they're a topical treatment that cannot do anything about your hormones. And if you're a woman, especially between the ages of like 16 and 35-ish, even above 35. If you're getting acne on a monthly basis, it's mostly due to hormones. So it's actually not a normal expectation to never have acne again if you've used a retinoid. The expectation is I should get less acne, it should heal faster, my skin texture should be better, my marks fade faster. But you can't really expect to never get acne again if the underlying reason that you have acne is hormonal, which for most people, most women, it usually is. My kitchen look really messy. Someone says, in my before photo, was that before retinol or during the purge? Can we see it during the purge? My purge wasn't that bad. I have some photos of my differin purge, because in 2023, last year, I had to stop using all retinoids because I had perioral dermatitis. So then after like 2 months, I had to start using a retinoid again. I started using differin. So I do have some photos of that purge. Obviously it's not the same, but you can see what that looks like. I'll put that on the screen. But I don't actually have any photos of the original purge. I do have photos during that time frame, but my I didn't get lots of like inflamed pimples. It was kind of just like some of them would turn into whiteheads, but they weren't enough to take pictures of really. I think because I'd found the solution, which was remove the moisturiser. By the way, it was the Kiehl's Ultra Facial Moisturiser, because everyone always asks that caused the closed comedones. Remove them, introduce a retinoid. All of the closed comedones were very much at the surface of my skin, so they kind of just like, if you imagine the closed comedone is like, this is the surface of my skin and this is the closed comedone like coming up, they were all kind of like this, and every time I use the retinoid they just go like like that, and to the point where sometimes they'd be halfway out of my face and I could just like pull them out. It was quite weird. So whilst I don't have photos of like the purge, because I don't think it looked like a typical purge in that particular scenario, I will have put the photos on the screen of the different purge, which was from a different time. Hope that helps. Someone says, did you ever get extractions, facials, etc, and would you recommend it? I did get extractions because once I realised that the moisturiser was royally screwing me over and I stopped using it and I had all these closed comedones, I just thought I was a really bad skin picker anyway. And I just thought maybe it would be good if someone just extracts most of them for me, because so that will get like half the work done. I think it's really important, and I keep looking in different places, I think it's really important that you're confident you've kind of figured out why you're getting the closed comedones before you get the extractions, because I was very confident of that. And you just don't want to go for extractions if you haven't identified what you think is the source, because otherwise you're just going to keep getting them. I did go for one facial at Skinwork in Soho in London. It was about 120 quid, which was very expensive, but I was just really nervous about extractions because if you're gonna get extractions done, it needs to be done by someone who knows what they're doing. You really don't want to go, I don't think you want to go cheap with it. That's just my opinion, because if it goes wrong, lots of scarring can happen. If you go cheap with it, you just run the risk. I mean, this can happen if you go somewhere expensive as well, but I think the risk is greater if you go to a salon that doesn't really do that very often, or kind of don't know how to do it properly, and they just go ham on your face, squeezing at your really delicate skin, especially delicate if you're using a retinoid. You might want to like lay off it for a week before you go. It can just go really wrong, get lots of scarring, potentially an infection. If it's a choice between going to a salon to get extractions and picking it yourself, always go to the salon. As much as I loved my skin work facial, I didn't really get that many out, and I found it to be a bit underwhelming. I don't think it was a bad facial, I think it was good and I enjoyed it and I would go back. Out of the extractions that I wanted to have, I got like 6. And I really had this vision of them doing it all on my face, but I don't know, maybe that would have been too much. Maybe they didn't have time, I'm not sure. So I think my one experience of an extraction probably isn't representative of all the extractions. So maybe if there's someone near you that has great reviews, I would judge it independently of my opinion. Can someone with a damaged skin barrier start to use retinoids? Not really. It's not recommended. I wouldn't recommend it, because if you start using retinoids, it's really going to test your skin barrier, and if your skin barrier is actively damaged, you're going to have a really bad time. It's really not going to be fun. You're not going to know if you're purging, if you've got acne, or whether your skin barrier is just damaged. You're not going to be able to consistently use the retinoid anyway, because it's going to get really uncomfortable and it's going to be really damaging. And the more you damage your skin barrier with the retinoid, which will happen, even if you have a healthy skin barrier, it's going to test your barrier. The more damage you do, the longer it's going to take to undo it and get to a place where you can use the retinoid. So I would recommend, if you do think you have a damaged skin barrier, don't use any actives, don't use vitamin C, only use hydrating ingredients, only use cleansers without exfoliating actives. Obviously don't physically exfoliate, cleanse, moisturise, barrier serum if you have it. If you need recommendations, I have a whole page on my blog of barrier products, SPF and moisturiser. I can't remember if I said that. Get that fixed before you do the retinoid journey. I know it can be really hard to wait, but trust me, that is one thing I am super clear on, and I will be super clear on, is don't start retinoids if you have damaged skin barrier. Should you use retinoids daily or every alternate day? I've seen mixed reviews. There's no best with this. There's no absolute best. You want to work your way up to using it as frequently as works for you. Ideally, I think you want to get to a point where you're using it minimum of 3 times a week. I've used it every day, I've used it every other day, I've used it for 3 days on, 1 day off. It really depends on your skin. As long as you're using it 3 times a week, I think, because every time you use it, you trigger a process, and you want to be triggering that process multiple times a week. And I think 2 times a week after you've adjusted to it is maybe just a bit too little to see optimum results. I also think using it every day, I think a lot of people think that's a flex. I just think if that suits you, great, but like, you can get just as good results using it every other day. And in fact, a lot of people who use it every day don't realize that their skin kind of looks dehydrated because they're using it every day. Whereas if they switch to every other day, they get the exact same result. There would be no difference in anti-aging in the long haul, pimples, whatever, and their skin would retain a little bit more hydration. So it's very personal, and in the beginning, you definitely want to work your way up. If you're just starting out with a retinoid and you're using it like once a week, twice a week, that's completely fine. When you eventually get to the point where you're like, cool, I feel fully adjusted now, I think a minimum of 3 times a week is good. Whether you do that every other day or you want to do it every day, doesn't really matter. But just don't sacrifice hydration and skin barrier health for using a retinoid. Like if your skin barrier feels damaged, skip a night, like it's not that deep. Is using tretinoin before a retinoid too extreme? My doctor prescribed it. So tretinoin is a retinoid. Anything in the retinoid family includes tretinoin, retinol, retinaldehydes, gram-active retinol. They're all in the retinoid family. Lots of people do start using tretinoin straight off the bat because their doctor prescribed it. It's totally doable for most people. Some people will have a bit of a rocky time. Like, it's never fun to start using tretinoin if you've never used a retinoid before. It really depends on what you're willing to go through. Some people start using it and they're like completely fine. I'm not one of those people. Those people are unicorns. But it's not an insane thing to do. And we have to remember that tretinoin is like a medical drug. It's not just like something you can pick up in the shop. So it's used to treat acne. That's its primary goal. And historically, before retinoids and tretinoin especially became trendy, that was a really common thing to happen when people go to a dermatologist. It's like one of the #1 prescribed things that people get from a dermatologist. So it's not an insane thing to do. You just want to do it knowing what you're getting into, knowing that it might be rough. It feels good to know how long it might take to adjust to, which actives to stop using with it. I would recommend all exfoliating actives to stop using with it. But just going straight in with tretinoin is not an insane thing to do. Just don't use it every day to start with. I would always recommend month 1, 1 to 2 times a week, month 2, 2 to 3 times a week, month 3, 3 to 4 times a week, and at that point you kind of know what you're doing with it. Would I recommend the adapalene gel or cream? Never tried the cream, love the gel. I think it's easy to forget that I think people are always looking for like the best skin product or the best thing with skincare, and a lot of it's just relative to who you are and what you like. The cream is supposed to be more moisturizing. Neither of them should be less effective than the other one just because they both have the same 0.1% or 0.3% adapalene. But I can only speak for me, I like the gel. Slight outfit change. I had a call to go through some details for my friend's hen party that I'm co-organising. Then I went to the gym, now I'm back. This one says how to layer retinoids with other products. There are some rules, but a lot of the skincare layering rules are like not that deep. I think with retinoids, you've got 2 choices. The one that I prefer, having tried both methods and deciding that I prefer this, but many people prefer the other method. The one that I prefer is to wash my face, dry it off with a clean, I call it a flannel, but apparently that's weird if you're American, face cloth. Press it into my face so that my face dries. Obviously you don't want to apply retinoid onto wet or damp skin. And you also don't want to air dry your face because that makes your face drier. It's called transepidermal water loss. So dry your face and then apply your retinoid. First thing, leave it 10 minutes minimum if you can, if you're in a rush, whatever, but if you have got the time, 10 minutes. And then put on the rest of your skincare. Obviously don't layer it with any other exfoliating acids. Azelaic acid is kind of an exfoliating acid, although it exfoliates in a different way. That's okay to layer with retinoid. Even though it's okay, doesn't mean that you should. I think this is a major thing that I struggle with in skincare advice online, when people are like, you can layer this and it will be fine. When the reality is, just because you can layer something doesn't mean that you should, because do you want to like put your skin through that and potentially see irritation? Or would you rather have like happy, healthy, hydrated skin? I always prefer the latter, so I tend not to layer things, but you can technically layer it with azelaic acid if you want to. The other method that I dislike is the sandwich or the buffering method, which is where you apply your moisturiser after cleansing, let that sink in, then apply your retinoid. That's the buffer method because the moisturiser is acting as a buffer. The sandwich method is that with moisturiser on top. That's to compensate for the dryness. There's a little thing outside making noise. I hope you can't hear that. I'm gonna have to get rid of that. Better. With the buffer and the sandwich method, it's not that it's bad, nothing wrong with it. I just don't really like it. It doesn't really work for me. I was using it for a long time, well not a long time, but I was using it to start with when I started using retinoids because I was super cautious, and then I stopped doing it and my results were just so much better. And the irritation, like I have sensitive skin, and the irritation that I've gotten from retinaldehyde, differin and tretinoin never been so much that I can't use it on my bare skin. In fact, although I have had irritation from retinoids, I feel like because my routine is quite skin preserving, because I don't cleanse in the morning, I don't use any of the acids, I don't use vitamin C, all of those things I think make it very easy for me to tolerate retinoids. I think it gets a lot more challenging when you start to mix like all of the things I just mentioned. Next question is the same. What should I layer first, retinol or moisturiser? And that's a choice. There is no like best situation. If you want to be extra cautious, you can try the buffer or the sandwich method. If you want to do what I did, you can just go in with your retinoid on dry skin. Why do you give a longer time frame for the purge than derms? The thing I would say is that dermatologists give different answers for pretty much all questions. So like I always say this, like if you lined up 100 dermatologists and you ask them a question, unless it's like a yes or a no answer, most dermatologists will give a slightly different answer for a lot of different skincare questions. I think personally, I give a longer time frame because I want to be realistic. It's not that I don't think dermatologists want to be realistic. I just think, I have so many theories on this. First one is that I just think it's quite off-putting to tell someone that the next 3 months of using a skincare product might be absolute hell on earth. The second one is they might have seen in their patients it be much shorter. Like a lot of the time dermatologists combine what they've learnt at school and what they've seen in their patients. So they might have learnt at school that it could be three weeks. But in their patients, they see it typically only lasts like 3 months. And what they see in their patients, they might see it only typically lasts in like all the patients they've ever seen a maximum of a month. So they'll probably say around about a month because to them, that's what has played out. Also, my dermatologist said 3 skin cycles, which is 3 months because a skin cycle is 6 weeks. So it's actually a little bit more than 3 months. So that's just an example of like why dermatologists say different things. It's kind of the same as in any industry. Like you can ask lots of people in the same profession a question, you get their answer, which is a combination of what they know in theory and also their lived experience. That's why I think they're different. Do you need to still continue using retinol even when your acne improves? The answer is pretty much yes. Retinoids don't cure, well, nothing really like cures acne, but retinoids don't fix acne forever. If your body was naturally going to produce acne because of all the things that are causing acne, which I won't go into. If you would naturally have acne, you start using the retinoid, it goes away and you stop using the retinoid, most likely it will eventually come back. It may not be as severe, but it probably will come back because using a retinoid is like going to the gym. If you stop going to the gym, your body will slowly go back to how it was because the things that you're doing at the gym are the things that are impacting your body that you can see, like the muscle mass that you have. If you stop using the muscle, it kind of will eventually go away. So yes, pretty much you do need to, with the exception of like, you might, for example, stop using the retinoid, and in the time that you'd stop using the retinoid, you might have aged like 5 years and you're now 35 and not 30, so your body wouldn't have acne at 35 just because of your genetics. Maybe there was something in your lifestyle that was causing you to have acne, such as you were really stressed, you had a job that you hated, or I'm not saying that's the only reason that you would have acne, but it might have been an aggravating factor, or I don't know, things like that. It would either be genetic or lifestyle oriented or both for the reason that you suddenly didn't have acne anymore and you stopped the retinoid. It wouldn't be that the retinoid cured your acne forever and it's never coming back. Is it normal a second purge when increasing frequency to every other day? Yes. Anytime I've increased my strength or increased my frequency, I will purge again. It's really fun. But it's usually not as bad and it's usually over quite quickly. I've been using differin for 2.5 months and still purging. Is it normal? Yeah, it is. It's not fun and it's not nice, and I wish that it weren't that way, but I think it is pretty normal to purge for, I mean, I certainly purged for that long, especially when I'd already used retinoids for like 3 years, and I took that break because of perioral dermatitis, and then I came back and used differin. That took way longer than I was expecting. Like I'd actually gotten quite cocky at that point, and I just thought, I've done this so many times. Like, even though I've taken 2 months off, I know that my skin, you know, I've still been using retinoids for a long time. Purge like wasn't that bad, and you will have seen the pictures in this video by now, but it did last probably like 7 or 8 weeks, which isn't that long for a first time user, but for me, I was quite shocked by it actually. Do all closed comedones come out and become pimples during the purging phase of using a retinoid? No. Some of them just rise to the surface and literally fall out. You can sometimes even like pull them out. It's quite weird. As I said before, some of them turn into whiteheads, some of them turn into cysts. It's usually a mix, and they usually come and go a lot quicker than the average spot that you would get. What ingredients does using a retinoid replace? Like, is retinol a replacement for all or some actives? So retinoids work differently than pretty much all other actives, including bakuchiol, which is a plant-based alternative, which I won't go into. Doesn't work the same as like salicylic acid, glycolic acid, azelaic. It's totally different. But I do think, anecdotally for me, in my experience, I think it does replace all of them. Honestly, like I used to be a die-hard acid fan. Can you even imagine that? Because I never talk about them on my channel, but I used to live and breathe acids, tell all my friends. People would always ask me like, what do you use? And I'd talk about acids forever. Until I started using a retinoid, and I was like, this is the best. I guess they don't work for everyone. They do work, but not everybody likes them, and I get that. Sorry, back to the question. Basically, I just think they're amazing, and you probably know that if you watch my content. But what do they replace? Acids, I think. I think the way their retinoid works is it just speeds up skin cell turnover. So your skin is just replacing itself so much faster than it normally does. And because of that, it's just very rare for you to get breakouts due to congestion. You're still going to get hormonal breakouts, they might not be as bad, but congestion and clogged pores, if that's something you suffer with and you're not pregnant or planning to get pregnant, I think retinoids will genuinely change your life, and salicylic acid has got nothing on retinoids, in my opinion. I know people love it, but yeah, I would say acid is the main thing that it replaces, because it boosts collagen, it reduces clogged pores, it refines skin texture, it fades marks, it stops you getting new acne, it makes pores look smaller. It does so much. It does so much. Thoughts on the possible link between topical retinol use and meibomian gland dysfunction? I have some thoughts. So meibomian glands are basically in your sort of eye line. What's the word that I'm thinking of? Can't remember the word that I'm thinking of, but they're sort of around your eyes. They produce oil to lubricate your eyes and your eyelashes, I believe. Not an expert, but I have spoken to an ophthalmologist about this and a dermatologist, so this is something that I've anecdotally experienced. Basically, I did get a bit of a dry eye a couple of years ago when I was using retinoids, and I started to realise that I had that problem. There weren't any symptoms other than I felt like I had dry eye. And so I started to use a retinoid eye cream instead of my prescription retinol. All of those problems went away. Hello. I fear I haven't explained that. Look at the camera. I fear I haven't explained that very well. I missed out some bits. Basically, meibomian, the problem with retinoids that people are worried about sometimes is that using a retinoid can shrink the oil glands around your eye, and because the gland is shrunk, it doesn't function as properly, so it doesn't lubricate your eyes as well, which means you can get dry eye, and it can also lead to some other issues. So that's the thing that the person was asking about. Also, the reason that I swapped from a prescription retinoid to a retinoid eye cream is simply because it was the same thing, kind of a retinoid in a much weaker formula. So it's kind of less harsh to use around the eyes. I still sometimes use it around the eyes, and you totally can use it around the eyes. You just need to use it in moderation. You need to avoid using too much, and sometimes it's just easier to use a retinoid eye cream. That is all. Can't really remember how long it took, maybe like a month, 2 months. I never have those problems ever again, and I have spoken to a dermatologist and they basically said it's reversible. That's my knowledge of it, having spoken to the two experts involved, the ophthalmologist and the dermatologist. However, they are only one ophthalmologist and one dermatologist in the world. You could speak to more and they'd give you different answers. Like I said before, it's quite common that people have different answers. Remind myself to not look so serious on camera. I haven't read any papers on this. I haven't done my research before I say this. This is why I'm saying that's just my experience. My experience is that it was reversible and it did happen. I wouldn't personally be worried about it because, as I said, I've hit my rock bottom there and I've come back from it and it wasn't that bad. But at the same time, I don't want to encourage people, you know, this isn't medical advice, and I don't want to encourage people to go lathering loads of retinoids around their eyes. Like, the advice is always use a tiny amount around your eyes. You don't want to be using loads. You don't want to be going into your waterline. That's the word I was thinking of. You just want to be going up to it and using a very conservative amount. But don't quote me on that because I haven't looked at any papers before I've said that. That's just my experience having lived through it and spoken to 2 people who are experts in that area. When did you start a retinoid? I started in March 2020 or April 2020. Thought the pandemic would be a good time. Also went down a rabbit hole of skincare like everybody else. Although I was already into skincare, but I went down my retinoid rabbit hole. How do you use facial tan drops when using differin? Would the differin just strip it off your skin? I always apply any fake tan to my face at the end of my routine. I don't like applying facial tanner to my skin before I've put a moisturiser on, mainly because hydration is my like ultimate goal, my North Star. If I want to speak like a tech startup, it's my North Star. It's a niche joke for anyone who's ever worked in a startup. And I also just think if you put the tan on when the skin isn't moisturised, it just clings to all your dry spots and makes you look a bit crusty. And I just don't use tanner on a different night. I use it on an azelaic acid night, and I alternate differin and azelaic acid. So I just don't want to mix fake tan with differin. So I just do it on a night when I'm not using it. I'm swapping from differin to tretinoin after 6 months on differin. Will there be a purge again? Differin to tret after 6 months on differin. There might be. You haven't stated which strength of tretinoin you'll be using. So tretinoin in one of the higher strengths probably will cause a small purge moving from differin to tretinoin. I experienced a purge going from retinaldehyde to tretinoin and after not using differin for 2 months. So in my experience, you do tend to get a small one, even if the difference in retinoids isn't that great, because you think it's not very big. You think, oh, it's like going from here to here, but really that's like your perception of that change. That's not reality. Does that make sense? That's quite deep. When does the purge start after using tret, and when does it stop? I've talked about when does it stop because it's different for everyone. You will just notice that you don't get any spots, or you don't get, like, most of the time when you use a retinoid, you will apply it at night, wake up in the morning, your face looks great. By midday, you've got like 3 random spots. That's the purge for me. It's like you wake up and you're like, oh, it's looking pretty good. And then by like 4 o'clock, you're like, where did they come from? So that sort of stops happening. And when does it start? It depends on what you're using before, how many times you're applying it. But it usually starts in a few days. It's usually like after using it 2 or 3 times. But sometimes it can take longer. And sometimes people don't have a purge. And those people are not my people. I'm kidding. You're just really lucky. I have closed comedones, but so much worse than you did. Would you recommend the same thing? Yeah, I would. I'm not gonna say like how could it get worse, but I just feel like my cheeks were like literally every pore was a closed comedone. But yes, I would. I just think retinoids are like the gold standard for closed comedones, personally. You do also need to get a routine that isn't giving you closed comedones in the first place, because if your routine is still giving you closed comedones, like say you're using a moisturiser, if I had still used that moisturiser and the retinoid at the same time, my closed comedones would still be there, because the retinoid is like, imagine you're like digging some mud, some weird analogies today. Imagine you're digging a hole to plant a plant, and your friend is just putting all the mud back in the hole. You're not going to get anywhere. That's like what's happening when you're using a product that's giving you closed comedones and you're using a retinoid. It's difficult, it's not easy, but you would need to aim to get somewhere where you know that your current routine isn't giving you closed comedones. And if you currently have closed comedones and you're about to add in a retinoid, it's safe to say that there's probably something in your routine that isn't quite ideal for you. Is it possible that retinoids just don't work for you? I've used it for over 1 year and no result. I think how to answer this question, and this is the last question by the way. I think this question is very relative. because I think a lot of people say it didn't work for me, and that would always lead me to wonder, where did you start with? What were your skin concerns and what were you hoping to get to? Some people's like not working is another person's worked. Does that make sense? So that would be my first question. The other thing is, take a shot every time I say other thing is, as I just mentioned, you could be using a cleanser, a moisturiser and an SPF that your skin just does not agree with. Even though they're like trending and popular and they don't break your friend out, they could just break you out. In closed comedones, some products don't give you like whiteheads or like red bumps. Some products just give you closed comedones over time. Or maybe it's your oil cleanser. Maybe your routine was fine and then you started using Clinique Take the Day Off and suddenly you've got closed comedones after like 3 months and you are like sure that it's not the cleanser, but it could be, because closed comedones are very insidious. They're quite slow to form. They take time to form. And I think that's why a lot of people have them, those exact examples that I've just shared. Makeup, improper removal of makeup, sunscreen that's popular for so many people but just doesn't work for you. But you've never had closed comedones before, so you doubt that it's the sunscreen, but it just happens to be the sunscreen. If you're just using a retinoid and hoping that it will work against all the products that aren't working for you, then that's probably why it wouldn't work. I think the reality of it is that it's probably something environmental and circumstantial that's causing it not to give you the results you want. And that might be your current skincare routine. Maybe you have hormonal acne, and tretinoin of course can't fix hormonal acne, although it can make it seem better. There's just so many things in somebody's life that are variables from person to person, and tretinoin can't work in all circumstances if those variables aren't right. But because I don't know what they are for you, I can't say what they would be. It is possible that you just never ever adjust to it and it's too strong for you, in which case, like some people, for example, just get peeling forever, even on the lower strength of tretinoin, in which case I would suggest either using something like Dermatica or Curology, because they use weaker strengths of tretinoin, like 0.015, which you can't buy or you can't really get from your dermatologist. The strengths they tend to have are like 0.025 and up. Or if you didn't want to do Dermatica or Curology, that type of thing, you could just use something like a retinaldehyde. There's not as much evidence for those, but they're kind of like a midway point between cosmetic retinol and tretinoin. And maybe you'll be able to tolerate it better, which means you can then use it more consistently, which means you can then get the results that you were looking for. So I know that question wasn't answered super succinctly, but hopefully that's shown you what there might be to work with to get the results that you want. Can't give you like an evidence-based answer that it might just not work for people, because I don't really think that's something that's measured. All that's measured is this is effective for quite a lot of people over many, many years and in many, many scenarios. So that would suggest that it is very effective. And the idea of it not working is very relative and subjective. So that's why I struggle to answer that in like a black and white way. That was a really unsatisfying question. My camera died just as I was finishing my last sentence. So what I was saying was that was a really unsatisfying answer to finish on, but I didn't want to just like make up an answer to be more satisfying. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you'd like me to do this kind of video on any other topic.